Hi everyone, this is Dr. Jeeva. Today we are going to deal with the gastrointestinal tract. So, the main function of the gastrointestinal tract, as you know, it is digestion. What is meant by digestion? Digestion is a process by which food is broken down into simple chemical substances that can be absorbed and used as nutrients by the body. All the living organisms require nutritive substances and water for survival and growth. So, the digestive process is accomplished by mechanical and enzymatic breakdown of foods into simpler compounds. Today's part, we will be dealing with the introduction and the functional anatomy and nerve supply of the gastrointestinal tract. So, the objective of this section is introduction, functional anatomy of gastrointestinal tract, wall of gastrointestinal tract, nerve supply of gastrointestinal tract, mastication, salivary glands, its functional anatomy, properties and composition, and secretion and regulation, and its applied physiology. The alimentary tract provides the body with continual supply of water, electrolytes, vitamins and nutrients. To achieve this requires movement of food through the alimentary tract, secretion of digestive juices and digestion of the food, absorption of water, various electrolytes, vitamins and digestive products, circulation of blood through the GI organs to carry away the absorbed substances, and control of all these functions by local, nervous and hormonal substances. The diagram shows the entire alimentary tract. Each part is adapted to its specific functions. Some to simple passage of food such as the esophagus, others to temporary storage of food such as the stomach, and others to digestion and absorption such as the small intestine. In this section, we will discuss about the basic principles of function in the entire alimentary tract. The diagram here shows a typical cross-section of the intestinal wall, including the following layers from outer surface to inward. It includes the serosa, a longitudinal smooth muscle layer, a circular smooth muscle layer, the submucosa, and the mucosa. In addition to these muscle layers, a sparse bundle of smooth muscle fiber, that is a mucosal muscle, lie in the deeper layers of the mucosa. The motor function of the gut are performed by the different layer of smooth muscle. So, the longitudinal muscle layer, the bundle extend longitudinally down the intestinal tract. In the circular muscle layer, they extend around the gut network of smooth muscle bundles. Therefore, each muscle layer function as a syncytium. That is, when an action potential is elicited anywhere within the muscle mass, it generally travels in all directions in the muscle. The distance that it travels depends on the excitability of the muscle. Sometimes it stops after only few millimeters, and other times it travels many centimeters or even the entire length and breadth of the intestinal tract. Now moving on to the electrical activity of gastrointestinal smooth muscle. The smooth muscle of the gastrointestinal tract is excited by almost continual slow intrinsic electrical activity along the membranes of the muscle fibers. This activity has two basic types of electrical waves, the slow waves and the spike waves. Slow waves. Most gastrointestinal tract contractions occur rhythmically, and this rhythm is determined mainly by the frequency of so-called slow waves of smooth muscle membrane potential. These waves are not action potential, instead they are slow, undulating changes in the resting membrane potential. Their intensity usually varies between 5 and 15 millivolts, and their frequency ranges in different Now the spike potential. The spike potential are true action potentials. They occur automatically when the resting membrane potential of GI smooth muscle become more positive than about minus 40 millivolts. The higher the slow wave potential raises, the greater the frequency of the spike potential. So we have already seen that the slow waves do not excite the muscle contraction and gastrointestinal tract. Instead, it excites the appearance of the intermittent spike potential, and this spike potential in turn actually excites the muscle contraction. So the higher the slow wave potential raises, the greater the frequency of spike potential. The spike potential has 10 to 40 times as long in gastrointestinal muscle as the action potential in large nerve fibers, each gastrointestinal spike lasting as long as 10 to 20 milliseconds. There is another important difference between the action potential of the gastrointestinal smooth muscle and those of nerve fibers is a manner in which they are generated. Okay. In nerve fibers, the action potentials are caused almost entirely by the rapid entry of the sodium ions through the sodium channels to the interior of the fibers. But in gastrointestinal muscle fiber, the channels responsible for the action potential are the calcium channels. It is due to the entry of large number of calcium ions along with smaller number of sodium ions. Therefore, this is called as calcium-sodium channels. These calcium channels are slower to open and close. So, the slowness of opening and closing of calcium channels accounts for longer duration of action potential. Also, the movement of large amount of calcium ions to the interior of the muscle fiber during the action potential plays a special role in causing the intestinal muscle fibers to contract. Now we'll see something about the changes in voltage of resting membrane potential. So, in addition to the slow waves and spike potential, the baseline voltage level of the smooth muscle resting membrane potential can also change. So under the normal condition, the resting membrane potential averages about minus 56 millivolts, but multiple factors can change this level. When the potential becomes less negative, which is more excitable, it is called depolarization of the muscle. Okay, so in depolarization, the potential becomes less negative and the muscle is more excitable. The factors that depolarize the membrane are, that is, which makes it more excitable are stretching of the muscle, stimulation of acetylcholine released from the endings of parasympathetic nerve, and stimulation by several specific gastrointestinal hormones. Now moving on to hyperpolarization. When the potential becomes more negative, which is called hyperpolarization, the fibers become less excitable. The factors responsible for hyperpolarization are, that is, the membrane potential is more negative are the effect of norepinephrine or epinephrine on the fiber membrane and stimulation of the sympathetic nerves that secrete mainly norepinephrine at their end. As we discussed previously, the smooth muscle contraction of GIT occurs in response to entry of calcium ion into the muscle fiber. You know already that the calcium ions acting to the calmodulin control mechanism activate the myosin filaments in the fiber, causing the forces to develop between the myosin filaments and actin filaments, thereby causing the muscle to contract. So, we have already discussed that the slow waves do not cause calcium ions to enter the smooth muscle fiber. That's why the slow waves do not cause any muscle contraction. Instead, it is during the spike potentials generated at the peaks of slow waves causes significant quantities of calcium ions to enter the fibers and cause most of the contraction. Some smooth muscles of the gastrointestinal tract exhibit tonic contraction as well as or instead of rhythmic contraction. The tonic contraction is continuous, not associated with basic electrical rhythm of the slow waves, but often lasting several minutes or even hours. The tonic contractions often increases or decreases in intensity, but it continues. It is sometimes caused by continuous repetitive spike potential. At other times, tonic contraction is caused by hormones or other factors that bring about continuous partial depolarization of the smooth muscle membrane without causing action potential. And the third cause of tonic contraction is continuous entry of calcium ions into the interior of the cell, brought in many ways not associated with the changes in the membrane potential. Now moving on to the neural control of gastrointestinal function, that is the enteric nervous system. So the gastrointestinal tract has a nervous system on its own, and it is called the enteric nervous system. This lies entirely in the wall of the gut, beginning in the esophagus and extending all the way to the anus. This highly developed enteric nervous system is especially important in controlling the gastrointestinal movements and secretion. The enteric nervous system is composed mainly of two flexes, an outer flexus and an inner flexus. An outer flexus lying between the longitudinal and circular muscle layer called the myenteric flexus or Auerbach's plexus. An inner flexus called the submucosal flexus or Meissner's plexus that lies in the submucosa. So the myenteric flexus controls mainly the gastrointestinal movements, and the submucosal, that is the inner flexus, controls mainly the gastrointestinal secretion and local blood flow. These flexuses can act independently, but they need stimulation by the parasympathetic and sympathetic system so that they can greatly enhance or inhibit the gastrointestinal functions.